Alrighty. Hello and welcome. I'm Zilla. This is Dan. And this is my stream Ancient Gaming, where we play video games with ancient studies content and talk about it. Today is part two of our playthrough of Battle of Olympus. Got that right this time?
Yes, the Battle of Olympus is an NES game from the 80s, which is all about Orpheus beating up every monster they could think of in Greek mythology to try to get Eurydice back, or Helene, as she's called in the instruction manual.
So we are about halfway through the game, hopefully finished today. And let's go ahead and get started. If you do want to check out part one or any of my other ancient gaming streams, you can always check out the various social media down in the bottom of the screen there. My YouTube channel, I do keep records of every playthrough that I do. And Dan will be playing today because I don't really NES or this type of game, but this has been very fun so far. So let's get going.
And a quick note: I am playing with some cheats on, just get infinite money, and also I am invulnerable. So just because it'll be a lot simpler if I don't just keep dying, and a lot faster, so we can just keep talking about what's going on. I have just gotten the second of 3 fragments of love, which are needed, which I need to collect. I am near the Garden of the Hesperides, and so I think I shall go and fight the dragon that lives in the Garden of the Hesperides, named Ladon.
And we have some fire-breathing flowers that don't in any way resemble those dragon heads from Castlevania. And some butterflies dropping some kind of mist.
So
And there's a dragon guarding the tree.
yeah,
So the dragon Ladon is a mythological figure known for guarding the tree of the Hesperides, which produces golden apples. The Hesperides being the daughters of Atlas, who guard the fruit of the gods. The golden apples.
there's a golden apple.
So the Greek word drakon we often translate as serpent or dragon. Those words are the same, so that kind of snaky shape that Ladon had, perfectly reasonable. And Ladon is one of 2 dragons' names that I know of in Greek mythology. The other being Python, the one that Apollo killed when he created his oracle, the Pythia. But dragons are kind of associated with / sacred to Apollo sometimes. There are also some unnamed dragons, or at least I don't know their names, which means they're pretty obscure if they are there. Such as the one that Cadmus killed when he founded civilization and sowed dragon's teeth into the earth to create the Spartoi, the sown men, which is what that means. The ones who were sown.
I just picked up the golden apple, and in game, what it does is it actually makes it so that all damage. I'll now take half damage from everything. If I were not horribly cheating and was to take damage, that would be very good for me.
The other dragon, of course, being the one at Colchis, which was guarding the Golden Fleece. And Jason, again, had to sow the dragon's teeth, and it created a group of armed men that sprang out of the ground, much like Cadmus's Spartoi, but he had to fight them. So the golden apple making you take half damage makes a little bit of sense, since the apples are sort of the apples of youth. So it protects you from harmful effects of mortality.
So these flashing things, I don't know if I mentioned this, these flashing things get dropped by enemies sometimes, will restore a point of health, and they are bay leaves, according to the manual. And that was the first place that I ever encountered bay leaves. It wasn't until many years later that I realized that they are actually a thing that you put in food when you're cooking.
Yeah, so this game uses some, Greek foods very oddly. Bay leaves, for instance, Are not necessarily a healing item. They're just a spice. And olives are the currency, which, to my knowledge, was never a thing in Greece. The more usual Greek currency for ancient times was the obol, which started off as an amount of metal equal to like a day's wage for a laborer, and so it's both a unit of weight and later the name for coinage.
And so I'm going to play the harp of Apollo at this monument of the sun and get picked up by Pegasus, who will take me from business.
Headed to Laconia, home of the Spartans, the Laconians, or Spartoi, and of course riding on a dolphin.
And as I think I said last time, this was the first place that I remember encountering the word ocarina. Even though ocarinas look just like that had been featured in some other games, they were usually translated as a flute.
Yeah, and the ocarina, not a particular feature of Greek music.
And I just went past where I fought the siren. This is I get to Crete.
Ah, to the labyrinth, the Minotaur. Um,
Well, right outside, there is going to be a unique enemy, which is not really a boss, but is mentioned by name and drawn in the manual, who is supposed to be Talos.
Talos. Oh, so the great automaton, a bronze statue of a person given life and reason by Hephaestus, meant to guard a particular island,
But not the island of Crete.
the island of Crete. Um, anyway, he was actually killed by Medea.
He's not really a boss, so he just comes back when you leave.
So usually he's figured as a giant rather than just a tall person.
I mean, assume that Orpheus is like 5 feet. This guy's got to be at least 11 feet, right? Maybe not
Huh.
11. But close to 10, right? I don't know. Seems pretty big.
But
Yeah.
um, the point being that Talos believed he was alive, and therefore, in some senses, was. Um, and didn't know that he was a created being. Didn't know that he was kept alive by the magical essence that Hephaestus put into his creation. And Medea, in trying to persevere in running from Colchis with Jason, when they encountered Talos, tricked Talos into killing himself, actually, by persuading him that a particular feature of his ankle, there was like a bronze stopper in his ankle. She claimed that it was keeping him imprisoned. I think that was the version of it. And when he pulled it out, all of the oil, the magic essence in him, ran out, and he stopped moving.
Yeah. And there was one of the Ray Harryhausen Greek mythology movies, Mastodon Clash of the Titans, featured a fight with Talos, which they pulled the plug in his ankle. And one thing that is notable right here is that if you notice, that's the bad example, because basically when you just strike him normally, nothing happens. You actually have to hit his legs. You have to hit him below the belt to actually do damage to him. Nothing else works.
I see.
So that's kind of cute.
That is kind of cute. One thing I had wanted to point out about, oh my, so these are those Amazons and ninjas you were talking about.
Yep.
So these perfectly normal Greek columns, except for they're topped with lion heads. Don't know what that's about. Amazons, not noted to be a presence in Crete particularly, more associated with the steppes and potentially with the nomadic horse archers there, who did have women in their fighting ranks, because why wouldn't you? Um, but are also, you know, they're sort of hypersexualized and othered by the Greek mythology of it all. The is that actually like in game called a ninja? Is that
No, it might be called like a shadow or something like that. It
well?
is.
It definitely is shadowy
I don't think it's mentioned in the manual specifically, but it's yeah, it's just kind of it's because I can do this, and so it's a way of preventing me from
from just escaping all of the.
yeah.
Well, I wonder if since this whole thing is sort of a journey to Hades, if it's meant to be a shade, an undead.
Hmm.
'Cause they do refer to the souls of the dead as shades. Um, that's a common way to frame it. And of course, we have these lovely Slimer ghosts.
Yep.
Very tradition. No, no, I can't even. Um, so
Yeah, so this place is a maze with lots of everything looking all the same. So I'm just sort of following a description that I get through.
it's interesting that they have two different heights of Amazon Warrior.
Yeah, and like the thing is that this is one of those places where it is clearly very inspired by Zelda 2, because these things they fight like Dark Nuts or something in Zelda 2. However, one of the problems with this game, which is not apparent because I'm invulnerable, is that your shield does not work as well as Link's does in Zelda 2. And so it means that it's like I can duck and block low blows, but it's really very hard to do anything but that. And so the shield itself is, yeah, and so that means that the combat is a lot less strategic, and it's a lot more of kind of a struggle to survive, as opposed to like feeling like you're actually dueling with this other thing that can do what you can do.
So, yeah, to back up a little bit, I had wanted to mention that the actual hero who interacted with Ladon and slew him, stealing apples from the Garden of the Hesperides, was Heracles. So that was another of the 10 labors that has been here appropriated.
Yeah, they already beat the Nemean lion. And so here we have, this is the god of war, Ares.
Okay, who looks, of course, exactly the same as all the other bearded gods. Um, Ares is typically depicted with a beard, not usually a shaggy one though, and definitely with armor. Ares, the god of war, is typically a bit more martial than civic in these swathing robes.
Yeah, although he is kind of mean, because he'll give you this bracelet for 80 olives. If you don't actually have the money, he will take away the sandals of Hermes from you. And
Wow.
so then you'll if you want them back, you'll need to go back and see Hermes to get them back. But have infinite money, and so there we go. There's the bracelet.
So what does the bracelet do?
So what the bracelet does is it will double my attack power normally, and also it allows me to use this attack without draining my health,
I see.
which is the power of Argos.
So it's at least a little bit like the bracers of Heracles, like you might see in, like when we were playing Phoenix Rising. The bracers of Heracles allowed for extra strength, so theoretically, extra attack power makes sense for that. It does make sense for there to be a maze here. I haven't actually talked about the fact that we're on Crete in a maze. Although Ares being the temple here doesn't make particular sense, but there probably were temples of Ares, sure. So the myth of the Minotaur, of course, one of the perennial favorites. The the king and queen of Crete, Minos and Pasiphae, were bragging about how wonderful their children were, and pissed off one of the gods. and Aphrodite made Pasiphae fall in love with a particularly handsome and virile bull. And so she forced Daedalus, the inventor, to craft her a cow suit so that she could have what she wanted. And what resulted was the Minotaur, a monster with the head of a bull and the body of a human. Um, they then forced Daedalus to build a labyrinth to contain the monster. And at that time, Crete had dominion over the city of Athens and forced Athens to send a tribute of uh, 12 young maidens and 12 young boys to be eaten by the Minotaur. And finally, the son of the king of Athens, Theseus, the worst, convinced his father to let him go. His father was named Aegeus, and he was going to go and slay the Minotaur. And he didn't really make a lot of preparations for how to do this. He was just gonna do it. So okay, he goes. He persuades the princess of Crete, Ariadne, to fall in love with him, and she helps him by giving him a clue, by which I mean the old definition of clue, which is a ball of yarn. So he threads his way through the labyrinth, finds the Minotaur, slays the Minotaur, and then follows the yarn back out. He then abducts Ariadne, flees back to Athens, drops Ariadne off on an island on the way, just abandons her, like he apparently does, and forgets to change the sails on his boat like he promised his father that he would if he survived. So his father thinks that his son is dead and throws himself off the cliffs, and thereafter the sea is named the Aegean after him. Theseus becomes king of Athens and continues to be a national hero and general douchebag for many years.
So here is an unexpected new person. So I've got 20. Oh, should I actually say her name at all? Yeah, so I get a salamander shield for this person. I guess it doesn't say that. So I think somebody else, some other NPC mentions that is supposed to be Circe.
Interesting. So Circe here, first of all, on Crete, which is not her own island of Aiaia. Second of all, depicted as an old woman, which we never do see when she comes up. We only ever see her as a beautiful young woman. She is regarded as a witch, a pharmakeia. Now, what they termed witchcraft versus herb work is a little bit fuzzy. It depends on where and when. But Circe's powers were all to do with plants and herbs and drafts, things that you would ingest or have sprinkled upon you as an ointment.
So here's the barrier that it is said that the second piece of love will remove the barrier. It also mentions the Minotaur uses a barrier. It is actually possible to cheat your way past the barrier. If you don't have the second fragment of love, you can do a thing where you can have an enemy knock you through the barrier and therefore skip a lot of the game.
Wow.
But as it is, I've got that second piece, so as soon as I get close to it, it will just disappear, and I can continue on to fight the Minotaur.
There he is, Asterion himself.
And he is just, you basically just kind of have to avoid the shield. And, like, he's a pretty tough fight normally, but, there's all this stuff about how he just, only one of these thrown things on screen at a time, so you can use that to your advantage when fighting him. But you beat him up, and you go through this door.
To more identical, very un-Greek places.
And here is the third of the, I think they call them nymphs.
Yes, our fairy-like nymphs.
So I should get the third fragment of love of Eurydice. Eurydice, who was taken away to Tartarus. Now, all three fragments of love, Aphrodite, lead me through Tartarus.
Aphrodite and the other overworld gods cannot typically go into Hades at all, let alone into Tartarus. Um, it's one of the characteristics of Hermes, who can break boundaries, that he is able to go into Hades at all. Um, so immortal gods going into the land of death is usually very, very limited, and Aphrodite certainly can never do it.
So this, I'm going to get another message from Eurydice or Helene. Completed my trials well. In order to the land where Hades lives, along the sea between Crete and Argolis, has been opened. Aphrodite has sent the nymphs to Tartarus to help me. Rescue her before it is too late. Right, no
So the idea of sort of hell mouths, as it were, ways into Hades, being physical places, is very common to Greek and Roman mindsets. They were typically sort of caves that went down into either into the sea or into lava tunnels, or some place that was inhospitable for humans to go while living. There was even a particular place on the coast of Anatolia. I can't remember quite where people would go down into the cave, and there was like it was just big enough that you could go down into it, and there was a sort of geyser that would push you back out. And people considered this a holy experience of being as close to death as you could.
So this guy tells me that I should, in fact, go to Phrygia.
Phrygia.
Phrygia. Goddess of whom Artemis has a very important item for me.
Okay.
Because it would be tempting to just go straight to Tartarus, but that is that is not going to work out for you if you do that.
So, Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, one of the goddesses associated with the moon. She's not quite as closely identified with the moon as, for instance, Selene, who just is the moon, in the way that Helios is the sun. And then, of course, there is Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft and wisdom and crossroads, another border goddess, another chthonic goddess, someone associated with the underworld. So, Artemis and Apollo are also, fun fact, gods of disease. They're considered the arrows of Apollo and Artemis, diseases and plagues.
This is a little hint to tell me how to get through a bit of a maze that's going to be in Tartarus.
That kind of reminds me, like, the maze in getting into Tartarus reminds me a little bit of the Orphic mythology. So, there are various...
Orphic mythology in this game?
Yes, of course. Orphic mythology, named after Orpheus. Supposedly knowledge brought back from him after he went into the underworld to rescue Eurydice. But if you read the Orphic tablets and stuff, there is actually instructions on when you come to the edge of the Styx, there's like a fountain and you have to walk this way around it. Like, it's a whole thing about how to come back from death and live eternally.
So that is the way in, but I don't want to take that yet
Because you need to see Artemis first, who is apparently in Phrygia, a non-Greek area entirely. I think there might have been a colony in Phrygia. But the Phrygians are another people, and this coastline is dotted with Greek colonies. The Ionian coast there on the edge of what we now call Turkey. The Phrygians are another people. So, a little bit odd. There is a famous statue of called Artemis. Whether you want to say that it is the same, whether that syncretism really works. Syncretism, when you take two gods that have similar qualities and decide that they're the same. Like, it's pretty easy to do for Roman and Greek mythology because they sort of transferred a lot of stories, although they're not 100% the same, the Roman and Greek gods. Uh, but like you get people calling Thoth the Egyptian Hermes in ancient Greece. That's what they decided. Even though that doesn't make a ton of sense to what we understand about Hermes or Thoth, but Greek syncretism is its own ball of wax. But there is an Artemis of Ephesus, which is over in this region that we're headed to. That is Artemis, mother of beasts, and unlike Greek figures of Artemis, there's wait, am I conflating two Artemises? Ephesus is the statue, isn't it? The big temple. The mother of beasts is also from this region.
This is where I fought Lamia and rescued that kid way early in
Yeah.
the game.
Um,
Now I get to Phrygia.
so Greek depictions of Artemis are always pretty sexless. She's the goddess of virgin women, and of hunters. She's pretty much depicted as flat, and oh my goodness,
For
is
some
that
reason,
an evil unicorn
yeah,
Pegasus?
for some reason, it's just weird.
Does it have a name?
I think it's sort of called like the Dark Pegasus or something. But it's
My Little Pony friendship is tragic? Question mark.
I am in Phrygia, which is a very difficult part of the game. So I'm very happy to be invulnerable.
Looking much more Greek than a lot of the Greek parts of the game.
This is all the stuff about going indoors and outdoors to try to get through things. Yeah.
Giant snakes
Oh, this
spitting
place is
something.
all full of snakes. Like nothing but snakes in Phrygia.
I and flying monkeys.
I think they might be gargoyles.
Oh,
Like, was it just advanced leadership? I'm sure I'll let you know one of them too. Yeah. But yeah, just all full of giant snakes, which are really, really tough if you're not invulnerable. Really tough to deal with.
they seem to take a lot of hits.
Yeah, and pretty much it's like in a way they are how you know you're going in the right direction. Like if you're going and you see a giant snake, that's the way you should be going. Yeah, see, I think these things are meant to be like gargoyles or something.
Very odd. I mean, it makes sense for Orpheus to want to fight snakes, since it was a snake that bit Eurydice and sent her to the underworld. Although she was running away from a satyr who wanted to rape her. So really, I would think he'd want to fight satyrs.
And it's just a coincidence that like Ophidian is a word for snake, right? Doesn't have anything to do with Orpheus.
Yeah, no, they're completely different words. That R in there is not movable. And the vowels afterwards are different.
You can imagine how these things are just meant to knock you off and do this.
Absolutely. Um,
It's like so should go up or down. There's a snake down there, which means yes for down. I remember there being a place in here where I got the last ambrosia. I think it might be here. Yeah. So now I've got a full health bar. Cannot get any bigger. That's how you know you're nearing the end of the game.
mhm.
Yeah, a little bit about my personal experience. Like when I first played this game, when it was pretty new, it was basically I was really, really hungry for Greek mythology content at the time. Like I had read all of the Greek mythology books in my local library, and that's just all I wanted was just more Greek mythology. And so it's the same.
It's a very relatable
Yeah, and
experience.
it's the same impulse that like a few years later made me like really get into like Hercules and Xena when they were on, because they were similarly this sort of, monster mash version of Greek mythology. And so this just really fed something that I was hungry for at the time. So here's Artemis, goddess of the moon, and she will explain a little bit about Hades, who conceals himself with a magic hat.
That does actually come from Greek mythology. Hades has a helmet of invisibility, sometimes referred to as a cap or a hat, that makes him impossible to see. And this is one of those things that comes up a lot when you have heroes who want to do stuff in the underworld, when they have a catabasis, a going down into the land of the dead. So if you can't see Hades, you can't protect yourself against him. And the idea is that death is an invisible force. That's usually the interpretation, right? But here, I think that.
If I was moon crystal.
Okay, that's nonsense. Moon crystals, not a thing in Greek mythology. The magic hat, yes. The moon crystal, no. Crystals are not integral.
So the fastest way to get out of here is really just to do this.
Wow, 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 wow.
Start of the area. It's so much faster than that. Using death as a shortcut.
I mean, you are headed to Hades. I guess I should explain a little about Hades and Tartarus. So in this game they seem to be calling all of the land of Hades, they seem to be calling it Tartarus. And sometimes you will see that conflation. Tartarus is often figured as a part of the land of Hades, along with Elysium and Asphodel and other things. And like these different areas can have different meanings. Like Erebus is the deepest part of Hades, the blackest pit in the earth, where where the treacherous titans sleep, kind of thing. And Tartarus is usually like the where you would see sort of the punishment of the hubris of mortals who really just outdid themselves, people like Sisyphus and Ixion, Tantalus. But like all of the areas of Hades, of the land of the dead, all of them are considered just a terrible place to be, even Elysium, which is the place where heroes go. Like if there's a line in the Odyssey where Odysseus is talking to Achilles' shade, and Achilles says, "I would rather live as a peasant for just one day under the light of the sun than be a king in Elysium, in Hades." So, death, definitely a thing for the Greeks to avoid. They do not like it. They do not like where it goes. And the hope of salvation is what fuels a lot of these sort of cults. Not salvation in a moral sense, but just in the sense of rebirth into the realm of the living. Because that's where all the good shit is. Everything good is here. If you can get taken up into the realm of the gods, obviously that's better, but that doesn't really happen much. So, in Orphic mythology and in the Eleusinian Mysteries, which I brought up last time, and in several other of these groups, the whole point of them is to try and find a way to escape being trapped in Hades forever.
Going back to the space between Crete and Argolis, I think, and where I can find the path, the shortest way to Hades. And so
Really, I thought the shortest way was just to, fall and die. I thought we had discussed this.
anyway,
So it's just a maze of choices.
so if I take the wrong one, I actually will refight one of the bosses from earlier in the game. Which
Interesting.
is kind of cute. But if I go the correct way, and I fight.
Invisible Hades?
This
Oh no,
guy.
Cerberus.
Yeah.
Hi, Cerberus.
Yeah.
Hello, pupper.
Yeah. And
It's unclear how many heads he has, but presumably they
and
intend it to be 3.
So if hit them enough, one of them will come off. But if you wait long enough, it actually will regrow.
Oh my.
So you
So a
just
little bit of Hydra in here.
yeah. So a bit of yeah, a bit of
It really does seem like he has two heads.
it feels that way, yeah. But you
Um,
hit him
so
hard.
Cerberus, Kerberos, the guardian of the way in and out of the realm of the dead. Um, it's become sort of fashionable to try and translate Kerberos, especially if you if you like the idea that he's named Spotty. That translation is very iffy. All translations of Kerberos are very iffy. Of course, Aphrodite cannot be here. Neither can nymphs. They're still goddesses. They can't exist here. I presume that this is one of the rivers of the undead. The rivers of the dead. I mean, this is probably the Styx that you're having to cross here. This is the main one.
Seems likely.
There's no ferryman to carry you across, and of course he wouldn't. He doesn't carry living people in his boat.
Okay. So I think the first, yeah.
But there are 1, 3, or 5 rivers of the dead,
I was trying to jump on the ceiling.
depending on exactly which description of the underworld you read. Styx, of course, is the most important one, the one that is always there. You'll often see Acheron and Lethe. Acheron, the river of fire. Wait, is that right? Am I getting it mixed up with the one of bitterness? And Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, where souls lose the memories of their living time, which they can then only get back if they drink sacrifice blood.
Okay, I need to be a little careful. 'Cause the thing is that like once I get past the like the checkpoint, there's a checkpoint like very shortly after.
And then there's Phlegethon, which is why I think that's the river of fire, and Acheron is the river of bitterness.
I'm pretty sure Phlegethon's the
And then I always forget the last one because it's the one people name the least. It starts with a K, I think.
okay, that's
The something like that, like the river of darkness, I believe. Kakika, Kakidon. I'm gonna look it up. Cocytus.
similar to what I said.
Cocytus literally meaning lamentation.
Okay, so now I'm at a checkpoint because there's a super annoying jump right here, where because you're on the ceiling, if you go to if you were going to fall into the abyss of the sky, then you automatically flip over. And so there's this jump here where it's like if you jump too hard, then you'll flip over normally. If you miss the jump, it'll make you flip over. And so it's very nice that the checkpoint is right before this point because yikes. Okay, I made the jump,
Woo!
which is when you're invulnerable, pretty much the only thing that can stop you.
Well, I guess you're going the right way. Killing some more giant snakes.
Okay, I don't remember if I went up or down. Like I said, this is a bit of two doors, enter the upper one. Yeah, this is just pretty sure that, yeah.
Watching those eagles drop stuff is really funny. It keeps reminding me of one of the funnier deaths that is reported from ancient Greece is the death of Aeschylus, in which an eagle drops a tortoise shell onto his head and it kills him. I it's just very ridiculous. And therefore it makes me wonder if it really happened, you know? Like oh that's so ridiculous it kind of had to happen. Otherwise why would they give this very like dignified figure such an undignified death?
Well, apparently Eurydice has been turned to stone by Hades.
Not a power of Hades that I know of. Actually, a power of Medusa, not that she necessarily wanted it.
I guess you could say that Eurydice has been pretty literally objectified.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I think you might have, in fact.
Okay, left one and keep hitting left. So more Amazons, because why not?
In the underworld. Alright.
All right.
Demon face, very not Greek. The Greeks really did not go in for.
Here's the Lamia again.
Well, she is dead. No reason she couldn't be in the underworld. But that demon face is just really not something that you would see. The closest that I can think of is Medusa heads. They do use Medusa heads as sort of an apotropaic figure to turn away evil, to turn away the evil eye, to scare off grave robbers, that kind of thing. But you'll see her as more of like she's got snaky hair, not horns, and her fangs are like more like tusks, and she'll stick her tongue out. But like you don't have this sort of horned, pointy-eared demon thing going on.
And the Gorgon image as a protective thing that is like a very common and long-lasting thing. Like that is like possible to that might predate like the Medusa story and things like that.
Oh, very possibly, yeah. Medusa was not the only Gorgon, not the first Gorgon. She has two sisters, Euryale and her
Something.
Stheno. Thank you.
I learned that from a Greek mythology book in my library growing up. So every single one.
Yeah, it's so funny how mythology is so captivating for so many people at a young age, and then people just like completely depart from it at some point. But it's not just Greek mythology, although Greek mythology is much more accessible in terms of having publications for children than a lot of other mythos. Mythoi? Mythos, by the way, just the Greek word for story. Um,
Yeah, I remember trying to get into other mythologies like Norse mythology and things like that, and it really just there just was not as much.
yeah, there's not as much out there, which is a shame because you know all of the various mythologies and ideologies of the world are just really they're all equally fascinating, and we're all at some point equally meaningful. But especially in Anglophone countries, places where we speak English, we tend to really focus in on Greek and Roman mythology as the mythology, and then like the uh, biblical story as religion. And we tend to forget that mythology really just is a form of religious practice, of religious understanding of the world. So there are some neo Greek worshippers who worship the Greek gods, just as there are neo Norse worshippers and other subsets. But these were once the stories of people who really like this was how they thought about the world, and not in a very literal sense mostly, but in sort of a like this is their version of angels and demons in heaven and hell, right? It's not actually separate as a concept. It's not lesser, and it's not of lesser importance. It's just not common now.
Yeah, and I think like with regard to like Greek and Roman, for some reason a lot of like the like stories of like the classical mythology, like especially like Rome and everything, like that was a big part of English language education
Hmm.
for centuries.
Right, because an understanding of the classical world of ancient Greece and Rome of a specific time period was set as a cultural prefiguration of what we have now.
Oh yeah,
And so
yes, they,
like the the Victorians, for instance, really tried very hard to project themselves as the inheritors of Rome, and that the education in Greek and Roman materials was a part of that, and so it's kind of this elitist inheritance trying to trace back. Oh, I take it this is our statue of Eurydice.
that's right. So she is right there, and so that means that Hades is close. But like I remember learning uh, about like early modern English literature, like Shakespeare and things like that, and is just all full of classical, allusions because that was a
That was
big
the
part.
education.
Yeah, that was the education. Public education included like Ovid and other things, and
Yeah,
so it's
particularly Latin. Like a lot of the Greek stuff got lost, but Latin had become the language of empire, and so all of the places that had Latin as sort of the elite language, whether or not they kept it, which eventually most of them didn't, or just merged it with what they had, like a lot of those places still today see Latin and Roman and therefore Greek culture and mythology and works as classics. Like that's why we call it classics, right? Which is something that younger scholars are trying to get away from to talk about ancient Greek and Roman studies or Mediterranean studies or something like that. Because the truth is that those are no better or worse than other literatures and stories and cultures throughout the world. We have tons of knowledge about ancient Egypt, about the ancient Near East, about ancient China that we just don't think of in the same context, but we really should.
I want to point out, I find it amusing if you look at the proportions on her compared to him.
Yeah, he looks like a child.
Like her head compared to his head, it's like if it's like okay, so if their heads are actually the same, that would mean maybe she's really far in the background, in which case she is huge.
Yes.
But no, it's just it's kind of weird how he's got like a giant baby head, and she's like a normally proportioned person.
Yes. I was thinking it was kind of funny that she's so obviously so much taller than he is, which a lot of things will try to tell you that you know a guy needs to be taller than the girl he's dating, but it's kind of funny how often when you see the most beautiful woman in the world depicted, right? She's very tall.
No, my partner is in fact taller than I am, and it is very tempting to look at another famous couple, uh, the Gomez and Morticia Adams, where Gomez,
Classy.
Raul Julia unfortunately was a much taller Gomez than any other, but Gomez traditionally is depicted as being much shorter than Morticia.
And we all know those are relationship goals right there.
So now to go on, and so here we have so Hades is here, but I can't see him. However, if I use this moon pearl, it will cause the moon to appear, and now I
Ah.
can see his shadow and my shadow in the light of the moon, and that is how I can fight him. And he's just swinging ineffectively because he can't hurt me because I'm invulnerable. Because I'm a cheating cheater face.
You are a cheating McCreator face. It's true.
And if I hit him enough, his helmet will fly off, and I'll get to see him for real. That is what Hades is looking like.
That's so interesting because he looks so much more like a Greek god than any of the other Greek gods. Like, look at him. He's dressed in armor. He's got a the cap on that we were talking about. His face has more definition than than any of the others, and it has that kind of like Greek cheek strap thing that you see on statues sometimes. He's got greaves on his lower legs.
And of course, because this is a video game, my primary way of interacting with the world is violence.
Uh huh.
I can't just play this here harp like Orpheus is supposed to charm him. It doesn't do anything. Just got to beat him up. Just like the dry eye, I put the steel guy, I had to beat them up first.
But like he's more proportionally similar to Eurydice, and it makes you kind of wonder if that was why in this universe. Like, oh, a woman who's as beautiful as me.
So you beat him up and he explodes, and you get this happy music, which is basically the title screen music, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the title screen music.
Isn't there a similar fight in Zelda 2 where you can't see the person?
Well, in Zelda 2, which this was very clearly inspired by, the final fight is against Link's shadow, and that was also interviews have been done in which one of the designers of the game said that was a direct inspiration. And in a way, I'm not going to say this did it better, but I feel like this was a very memorable way of doing a shadow fight because that whole thing,
Right.
you can see that is so clever, especially for this era of gaming. That the just being able to see the reflection in the water, and that is how you fight him, is so.
That is really cool. I do want to point out that the moon would never shine on Hades. Like that's one of the decisive descriptions of the underworld is that the celestial bodies do not pass over it.
Well, I
So.
do the moon crystal power, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So, and then here is Eurydice, and if I go over to her, things will be fine. And it'll be the end.
You return her love to her, and she becomes a human girl once more. And she is dressed in a version of a Greek chiton and Greek sandals.
Oh yeah, I like the way the laces go.
Yeah, like they really bothered to give her that look. She's got a white garland on her head, so not laurel wreath, but maybe flowers, which is more characteristic for a young woman, especially at a wedding.
So why did they have them laced all the way up the leg? Did that just make everything stay better somehow?
Yeah. I mean, like, there are different styles. People have always liked fashion. That dress is not particularly good as a chiton, but I can see what they're trying to do.
I mean, she probably didn't. She probably did not get dressed up in her finest before getting, beaten by a snake or whatever.
Well, I mean, like, that's a very modern style of dress. It's not a chiton, but I can see what they were going for. Like, you definitely get the sort of like bunched up at the shoulders where you would secure a chiton with a cloak pin or a brooch pin, and then sort of wrapped around the waist. But you can see that that's not really like. That's not a belt there, that's just the dress being form-fitting, which is not really a thing. And also, it's very short. This would have been utterly scandalous.
I have beaten Hades, survived through uncountable hardships.
I think we could count them, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of them are debatable, and that's why it's uncountable. Because it's like, I fought the Lamia twice. Does that count as one or two hardships? I'm also pretty invulnerable. To express my sincere gratitude, being able to see you again is like a dream come true. Let's return together to the peaceful village of Ellis. That's a real place, right?
Ellis?
I believe that, and I think it was mentioned in the instruction
Maybe.
manual also as their home. Yeah, it says in the land of Peloponnesus, there's a quiet village called Ellis.
Oh yeah, it's situated in the northwest of the Peloponnese, west of Arcadia. It's a city that really has not come up a lot in my research, but it is mentioned in the catalog of ships in the Iliad, so it's definitely very ancient. Um, it's possibly a secondary place named Elis,
So
but
then I can
not a modern place.
go to the ending screen.
Oh, hey, look, Orpheus is taller than Eurydice
Yeah,
and looks like an actual person a little
yeah,
bit.
actually proportioned like a person without like
This ending
yeah.
looks just like a Castlevania ending. All
Mm-hmm.
we need is for those columns to start crumbling.
Yeah, in fact, like the columns, that's just the opening. Remember the title screen had like this column thing. It was nighttime, and now the sun is rising, which actually was a fairly common thing in a lot of games of this era, like in Ninja Gaiden and things, having the ending have a sunrise, and it's pretty cute how they do it with like just changing the palettes to change the colors. So here's the scenario is by those two people who I mentioned were newlyweds at the time, and the program is the by one half the couple, and the graphic is by the other half of the couple, and then the music is by a third guy who also did music for like the Kunio games, Keisawa, and
I'm actually kind of impressed we get this much information about an NES game.
it's interesting because the company Infinity does still exist. This game they tried to this game did not sell super well, so is the as far as I know the only original game that they made. So they found a niche later on, or like right after this, by porting Western PC games to like Japanese consoles and Japanese
Oh,
PCs.
interesting.
And the only other NES game, the only other game that came to America by them on the NES was their port of Ultima 4, which I actually thought was really good. Ultima Quest of the Avatar. But like they did things like porting Doom to Japanese PCs and stuff like that. So it was just that became their niche, and they do still exist. Although I got the impression that they've never really been secure. Like they're always kind of struggling, even as the company grew and everything. But they do still exist. They're still around. And but this game, their labor of love made by newlyweds trying to get their company off the ground. It's a
Absolutely
story.
adorable.
Yeah, very compelling story. And it looks like she is wearing the same dress actually.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. Even what Orpheus is wearing kind of looks like what he was wearing in the graphic. It's just,
His proportions are very different.
yeah, he looks very different.
Yeah, if I push start, I think it'll actually just restart the sunrise and everything. And so yeah, but I like pixel art, and I just think it's interesting how much they can do just by changing the palettes, just by changing the colors of specific things. Like there's no actual, like apart from the sun going up and her dress, there's no actual animation here. It is just they change the palettes as over time to make it look like a sunrise, and that is just really cute. I mean, it's not the best example of this that I've ever seen, but it's the one that's right here, right now, so I can talk about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Dan, for playing us this game that has been so important to you and introducing me to the mishmash that is Battle of Olympus.
Yeah, I mean, like Hercules, who ever heard of him? Heracles, he's an upstart. Orpheus is the one who fought the lion, the Lamia, laid on the dragon. Just like the Minotaur, it was also Orpheus. Orpheus did all of it. Everything else is propaganda or.
All right, folks, so that is the Battle of Olympus, and that does conclude this particular game, but I'm not ready to take a break, so I am going to start next week with Okami and take us in a totally different direction. Thank you, Dan, for joining us,
Very welcome.
and see you folks next time. Until then, keep learning.